Hello, fellow armchair generals. Fellow armchair generals. I'm just in a bit of a state of shock right now. I was watching television. I just don't know if I should even say what I'm thinking. Most of you don't want to be in my head. No, I don't hear little voices or anything like that, but it's just me screaming in my head. And no, you couldn't even guess at the topic that I'd love to have you try. Of the insanity. The insanity. And I don't mean, this is a crazy, crazy world, or some sort of, hyperbolic, over-the-top statement about stuff. I mean, if you even either the person who said the statement, and he's an elected Democratic politician in America, not a high one, not one that I'd ever heard of before. I doubt I'll ever hear of the person ever again, but it just wasn't some crazy guy sitting on the side of the road, and this is a person who's won an election and currently holds an office in the United States. And it could be a dog catcher. I don't know the exact office the person holds, though I do know the state that he holds an office in. So, but it literally could be like the dog catcher's office or something. But somebody who is an office holder, the statement that he made, and either he is lying, or he's literally insane. I mean, not mentally competent. I'm not saying he's like running around the street naked yelling the world's going to end or something like that. I mean, just it's just a demonstrably in not real thing that he either believes, so he believes something that isn't real. Oh, and I'm sure he's not the only person that believes this, trust me. Or he's lying and is just knowingly part of the group thinking. Let's just say we should escape to the rationality of Nazi thought and Japanese imperial conquest thought. So much more rational than what is happening today, and Soviet communism makes a whole lot more sense. And this wasn't an economic-based type statement thing, so makes a whole lot more sense. Okay. People sort of laugh and joke, well, if you hear this, it'll make your head explode. And I literally just heard this as I paused the television to start recording this, and I didn't know that I was going to be hearing this statement. And what is incredible is that people vote for somebody like this, and there isn't. Oh, and well, I presume it was a guy, but that's part of the irrationality. Some of the stuff. So I saw a picture of him. He looked like a guy to me, but he may be identifying as a camel or a tree. So who knows? Maybe he's a redwood, but he's not from the left coast, California, at all. So it's not even, that people aren't immediately recalling him. Well, the other alternative is a mean, evil Republican. I try to... I don't know how Hearts of Iron 3 viewers are going to take all this, because I really did start and was getting ready to go play this game, and I just hear this statement, and the actual details or facts of this statement are to a point unimportant, you know. So and so how can, you know, and I know some of you guys here, and I say it, and I really do like people of the left, shall we say, to be part of this channel, and I'm in no way in this discussion trying to get any of you to go away. And I doubt even most of you would even come anywhere near to defend this person's statement. And no, it wasn't a hateful statement, at least not as I can understand it. It was just literally not a rational statement. It was irrational, you know, how do I put this? You know, say if we were to have and yeah, maybe you're going to come up with it, have a politician that says the sun revolves around the earth is stationary, and the sun, you know, what is it, the Copernican or whatever or was Copernicus the guy? I'm sorry, what scientist? You know, they used to have this really weird model of the solar system in which the sun goes around the earth, and then these other planets do other sort of weird loop-de-loop orbits as well, and it was something that was just sort of mind-boggling complicated, and tell you, oh, well, the Earth goes around the sun, and these other planets go around the sun, and then all the math and everything makes a lot of sense and works. So I'm sorry if I'm getting some of that wrong, but, you know, it's sort of like, oh, yeah, no, the Earth goes, or the sun goes around the Earth. And somebody corrected, no, you're all wrong. The Earth doesn't move. The Earth is perfectly stationary. Everything rotates around it. And so, and I'm going to presume this person is just presuming, I don't know, is a graduate from a university of some sort. He looked, just because again, I just saw him less than a few seconds talking on television, and he looked presentable, and probably most elected officials are a graduate of a university, so he's theoretically have had that level of scientific degree. And this wasn't a misspeak. This was a very deliberate, and he was being very deliberate statement. And, you know, and so, and how you're not... How are these people normalized? How are these people getting power? And how are these things acceptable? I mean, this thing was on the scale. Again, it wasn't a hateful thing, at least as far as I could tell. But it would be on the thing as being a Holocaust denier or something, you know, in denying a basic established fact. You know, and you know, I don't want to say the AJ name here just because I don't want to be demonetized and kicked off YouTube, which people have gotten strikes for that, including H3H3 recently. Was, you know, much. I mean, I'm not even a YouTuber compared to him, and whatnot, and he gets a community guideline strikes for for doing stuff, so I don't even want to go near it. But how do you have such views? Because I don't want to say opinions, because this was not a statement of, well, I think it would be better if we all walked on our hands. It would protect our feet. No, it wasn't a, you know, this was a statement of, you know, basic, you know, we're not sure how much water flows downhill versus uphill. I mean, and I specifically, if you guys ever want to try to guess what the statement was, but you know, it was a basic level, a fundamental basic level statement like that. That is, as I'm thinking about it here, I can sort of kind of see in their weird, twisted ideology how that they could maybe go down some wacky road to try to get to some of this. But you know, just I'm still in a state of shock. I think you guys can tell, and I don't do this. I mean, this is not a stunt. This is not a. I'm sitting here trying to try to understand the person's statement. I'm trying to understand how the society can let this person have these views, and in a way, by the way, again, I do believe it as a man, made this statement. This isn't something that just popped out of his head or something. This is sort of like some sort of probably minor, but some sort of cause in his political universe of some sort. So he's uttered these statements, you know, out loud to some sort of group before. Maybe, you know, not to all, you know, to all of his voters. And if he has a TV ad or a radio ad or a flyer that's in the mail, he probably didn't put it on any of those. But this isn't, you know, something that, you know, I mean, it's literally almost the idea that if I had heard somebody say that, let's get the nets out and get the guy to the mental institution. He's, you know, saying we should all drink gasoline or something like that, you know. It just, you know, we can't let this person be out, and we got to get him help. You can't have outside voice thoughts like this, even if you have them inside your head. And so again, it wasn't like, you know, and I don't know what he would say that might be considered hateful. And he's not alone in saying things like this, though I have not heard others say specifically this thing. But he was at a sort of political type gathering, was talking to somebody who had a camera in his face. You could clearly tell he was speaking towards the camera, but it was a very informal type interview, something or other. I just again saw a clip of it, so it may have not been a lot of preparation, but so this wasn't a secret recording. Again, like I say, he was very specifically talking into a camera with lights and whatever. How does Western society survive this? Because yes, if all of you knew what this person said, you would just think it was some weird little blip on the thing. But I'm looking at its implications of they're not trying to round him up to put him in the booby hatch to get mental health help for him. And people are taking it as if his statement was some sort of rational statement. I mean, it was weirder than saying we need to have tin foil on our heads to keep us from our brains being controlled. I mean, that would be more of a rational statement, because yes, there are radio waves bouncing through society. And yes, maybe Bluetooth things stuck in your ear may cause brain cancer. I don't know that they will. I don't believe that they will. But there is, like I say, nothing provable or nothing proven yet, but it may be a rational supposition that somehow radio waves or other things really close to your brain, or big power lines really close to your house putting out some sort of electrical fields, may cause cancer. And it may do so. I don't know. But that would be, and the best solution for it would be some sort of tinfoil hat. That would be a 100 times more of a rational statement from a public, even again, this could be, he was described as an elected official, and they gave the state, it's unimportant other than it is not a state known for its nut jobbery. And, so, how do these people get elected? How can they, even something so minor, how can they stay elected? How can a society think that is an acceptable viewpoint to have, and think that anything else the person might say is rational? How does society function? How continue to function going forward? This is going to turn out to be one weird episode, and I in a way, I should just delete this, but or put this out. And I don't know, it may end up being a special episode, but I'm very serious. I was just had the TV on, listening to the news, as you can sort of tell, and as I was, loading up Hearts of Iron 4, getting ready, and I hear this thing just as before I pause, and even the sort of overall theme of the news story isn't over. I just paused it so as to start making recordings to watch it later. And so this has just hit me, and I just... And I learn a lot from my friend Azad's Hind. That's his screen name. I don't know anymore. He's as maybe you can guess, World War II historian types. He is a hardcore Indian nationalist, as his screen name would. And I call him my friend, and I don't agree with all of his views, and he doesn't agree with all of my views. He thinks Churchill is a monster. Maybe not as big a monster as Hitler, but maybe bigger. I don't know. Where he knows I don't try to dispute maybe the bad things that Churchill did, but I'm a super big fan of Churchill, and I think in the 20th century, that roughly 100-year period time, I say roughly because I say the 20th century really sort of starts in 1914 and ends in the fall of the Soviet Union, but just exactly when 89, 90, whatever. The man with the single most credit to saving Western civilization, which I value very highly, which I believe in, as I'm saying now, is going off the rails, but is Winston Churchill to me. So again, he's not somebody who can't do wrong. Well, I won't, if my friend or somebody else wants to point out something that he did was massively wrong, I'm going, okay, yeah, maybe if you've got the evidence, yeah, he did that wrong thing. Now, I don't know under the all the circumstances of whether he really approved or it was, as he saw it, a lesser of two evils or whatever, and he was an unapologetic British imperialist, wanting the British Empire in India to continue on in one form or another for a long time. And yeah, so me and my friend, we disagree over this. And I still call him my friend. But I'm learning about a, not maybe so much of an Indian viewpoint, but a non-Western viewpoint about some of the world. And now, of course, I'm talking to my friend in English. So my friend has to be some level of Westernized, because you don't speak a language without, to some degree, understanding the culture. Because, as I learned in studying Japanese, words don't necessarily mean the same thing in English as in Japanese. Sometimes there are, just because I'm still sort of in shock, not thinking of too much, but there's sometimes, sort of emotional phrases or something that probably beyond most of the Japanese that I know, but just, in sentence structure and other sort of things, it's a different culture. And again, I'm not an expert on Japanese culture. I know it better than I know Chinese culture, better than I know Korean culture, better than I know Vietnamese culture. It's one of the Far East Asian, Oriental, whatever you want to call it, cultures I know the best. It doesn't make me an expert, but it probably makes me know more about it than 99% of the people in Kansas. I didn't say in California because we have a lot of Japanese Americans in California, but, it does make me know more than most. And so, and I'm sure learning a bit about India from Azad's, but it's more sort of his view of Westerners is what I'm find most interesting and learning the most about, and how he sees Westerners. And again, I'm unapologetically pro-Western. Again, that doesn't mean that we're perfect. Again, like I say, we're going off the rails. But of all the major cultural groups out there in the world, I am most vehemently, strongly pro-Western. This man who said these things doesn't make me think that, some other culture is better. No, it's just that we seem to have a sickness. And I mean sickness. I don't mean, well, I don't know what exactly. I mean is like as in a disease, a sickness. Because it wasn't, well, I guess we can sort of go, maybe it was a slightly gross statement, and not in the German as in big statement, but gross as in a yucky statement, but and so one of the main, I'm interrupting myself, and I know that. One of the main goals or reasons I do this channel is to talk about the lessons of history. We can get into that the Zero used duraluminum, which is a type of aluminum, and other sort of intricate details of something, that are historical minutiae. But there's no real lesson for people to understand there, other than if you're interested in what made up the metallic structure of a Zero, if you're interested in that, what type of steel was used in the engine of a Zero. I don't know. somebody does, and there's probably on the 3-inch thick book of all the details and facts ever known about the Zeros, it's probably in there. That's going beyond my interest. I think I've watched a 1 or 2 hour documentary just on the Zero within the last year. It wasn't real shortly ago, but it was, a few months ago. And, and it held me, riveted to watch this, probably 1990s, maybe a little newer, I don't know. Really nice documentary on the Zero, and I learned a lot, and that was fascinating to me. But that's not really what I'm trying to, instead of tell the story in a science fiction world about learning about humanity and trying to set it in a world that is sort of neutral from current biases, cultural conflicts, and setting up two different cultures that aren't anything like our culture, so you don't automatically have one or the other to identify with, and you learn about the cultural conflicts in science fiction, and then you may sort of learn about some of that stuff and then maybe apply it to your real world life. Instead of doing that, I'm looking at the past, at real historical, like cultural conflicts or other things, and looking at them and then trying to draw lessons from them, sometimes comparing them to what's going in the world today, and so that you can get a historical lesson, a lesson about lessons from history, not just, oh, now I know the name of some general or some admiral or some politician, but try to learn the mistakes or the types of things. Just earlier today, I was reading the biography of Nimitz, called Admiral Nimitz, called Nimitz, and they talked about sort of what the Battle of Leyte and whatnot, and where they give Admiral Bill Halsey some orders that allow him to, if he encounters it, to go after the Japanese fleet. But they also tell him to hold this. It was in the Philippines, Leyte. I'm trying to see if it's just here. Not the Sulu Sea. It's probably one of the. I want to say the Santiago Pass, but that may be not it. Sorry. To hold one of the, somewhere, I don't remember what. Actually, I say reading it. I'm listening to the audiobook. I was shopping at the grocery store, listening to this. This is ways audiobooks, so I can do stuff like that and learn. And I do, trust me, I do read both hard, my home looks like a library, hard paper books, as well as, books on the internet, as well as audiobooks, as well as documentaries, and, I get information from many different sources. And so he's given this order to, hold the straits, protect the straits while the Americans were landing. And Surigao, that's probably the Surigao Straits, maybe. But if you get an opportunity, go out and sink the Japanese fleet. Well, and this is signed by Nimitz, so he's out there. They sort of spot some of the carriers. He's sending his fast battleships that he's commanding. He's racing out there, and then the Japanese surface fleet, not the carrier fleet, but the surface fleet, comes in after some escort carriers that were protecting the beach, and there's this big running fight. And leading up to this, before the fight starts, Nimitz, who is back in Pearl Harbor, and in Hawaii is wondering, well, did they form this task force? Because he was ordered to. And is it sitting in the straits protecting it? Wondering. And one of the officers, well, maybe you should, inquire about it. No, I don't want to influence the battle. And this is like over, an 8 or 12 hour time period. And then they start getting these radio reports of being attacked. And so finally, it ends up being a very big controversy. And I had heard little bits about this before. He sends a radio message. Where is, I think it's Task Force 34? The world, somebody tacks on, just give more backstory. When the U.S. sent out messages, they would put in a filler at the front and a filler at the back, and after the filler, they would put double consonants, and at the end of the message, they would put double consonants, two letters the same. So it might be buying groceries today, attack at noon. The boy has long hair. That was just to sort of mess up and make it difficult to decode. So there wasn't, starting, to commander, whatever, you would an actual put in the message, there wasn't, it was make it harder to decode. And they were supposed to strip away the filler. Well, the end of the thing is where is Task Force 34, the world wants to know. That was just the filler, but that gets to Halsey, really shakes Halsey up. So he's like 300 miles away. He's been steaming north after this carrier fleet. And then after an hour decides to turn around and steam 300 miles in the other direction, basically missing both things. And it's just, as they say, a miracle of God almost that these battleships don't sink a bunch of escort carriers. And I remember hearing about this when I was in naval ROTC many, many years ago. Big controversial thing in the Navy. And it's still, and this was back in the 80s. So it was still a very big controversial thing in naval circles. Now, my main instructor was a PT boat squadron commander in World War II. So he, lived the Pacific campaign. So yeah, so I had known some of this stuff, and so he doesn't follow his orders from Pearl Harbor and block the straits. He's going out aggressively trying to sink the Japanese fleet. So then other parts of the Japanese fleet almost sink all of the escort carriers and the landing ships and everything else. Just I go into some of the detail, and we probably will at some point, maybe. And so when they were talking about this within 24 hours of this happening back in Pearl Harbor, as sort of dinner, there was a former submarine captain who was being sent back to the U.S. Nimitz sort of kept something of an open house and having a lot of captains, especially every captain who of any sort of, any commander of any vessel. You didn't have to actually be a captain's rank. But so if you were, and most submarines weren't commanded by captains. They were captain of the submarine, but they didn't have the rank of captain. You showed up with a landing craft, some of these sort of bigger, not the little small boat ones, but, the landing craft tank or something, that would carry 20 or 30 tanks. You showed up with them. You showed up at the Pearl Harbor. You were supposed to, at the next available 11 o'clock in the morning, meet and greet. You were supposed to go meet and greet the admiral. And there would be, I don't know, from 1 to 20 or 30 captains there, and he would shake their hands, say hi to them, get to know a little bit about them, and talk to them as a group for about 20 or 30 minutes or something, and then that would break up. So every day, or most every day, they were doing this. So he wanted to, because all these ships were coming and going to the different fleets, and a lot of the captains who are, in charge of some, naval transport vessel, they probably already had previous experience as a second officer in some other vessel. So they've been out at sea, they've probably been at war. Maybe at war in the Atlantic, maybe at war in the Pacific. And maybe not newly commanded, appointed to command of a vessel. Maybe this is their second or third or fourth vessel they've commanded. So this way he's keeping in touch with what's going on in his area of command. Well, one of this submarine captain, who someone in the dinner quotes the sort of orders that Bill Halsey was given, and this former submarine commander, I believe, says, "Well, Admiral, it was your fault because you gave him you gave him carte blanche to do whatever he wanted by saying he can go out and engage the Japanese fleet, and he wasn't where you wanted him." You know, so this disaster, well, wasn't quite as bad a disaster it could be, and the Admiral, the whole room sort of is shocked that now this former sub-captain has now just said, "It's your fault, Admiral, for giving the order that allowed him to go wherever he wanted." And the whole room sort of goes silent, and everybody's just sort of looking at him, and I think Nimitz's answer is, "Well, that's enough of that." Now, this guy also happened to be named Chester Nimitz, his son, the Admiral's son, who was visiting his father on his way back, because he had gone into the Naval Academy and was a naval officer. And I have to agree with his son. It was the fault of Bill Halsey for running away with the fast battleships, that his main job was to protect the naval landing, because they were still landing. They still had ships offshore landing to, do this stuff. So it was his fault for leaving, but it was also Nimitz's fault for giving him too much latitude, especially somebody whose main goal is to go sink enemy ships. So he's going out looking for enemy ships. So, whose fault is... is it the fault of this nut job for making this nutty statement, or is it the fault of the people who elect him? Well, it's both their faults. And how do we go forward from here? I'm very serious about this, and I'm sure a few of you can spout off some statements, and they may or may not be correct about how we go forward from here. But we have at least in America, an indoctrinated generation who believes that deserts are full of water and oceans have no water in them, or other sorts of nonsense. And they all parrot this stuff as if it's real. And no one with credibility with them has contradicted them. I don't know if it's all this way in Europe, because I'm not there in Europe, but I get some soundings from people. What is the future of Western civilization? It isn't just going to go away. We are letting it being invaded. There are invasions that seemingly, maybe not literally, but seemingly, and mostly every single day into Western Europe, heavily into Spain and Italy from Africa. Now, these are 95% men, I would say, though I may be wrong about that, but a high majority of men, and they are 99% unarmed, and they are probably 70 to 80% don't mean to come in and commit massive societal violence as they see it. And how long does Europe just allow the flood of people in? And from watching me, I'm not talking about races of people. I'm talking about invaders that have radically different cultures and different viewpoints. It has nothing to do with the person's race. But how long do you... And there's going to be a reaction to this. And this is sort of what I'm thinking. There's not going to disappear tomorrow. You know, you could overrun Georgia, the country. You can overrun that. That's a small place. You're not going to overrun Western Europe without a severe reaction. And they've got nuclear weapons and modern tanks and a modern surveillance state. If, as somebody has said, and I know I've gone into some sort of Twitter war thingy with some people, you know. But if America goes dark, and they grab, and it goes dark, to the right or to the left, or to the wacky other direction, I don't know, you know, because I don't want to make this about communists or fascists, or it could be circle peoples. I don't know what group, what they believe, but circle peoples. Doesn't, you know, it's not meant to be that way. But if it goes dark and they grab hold of things like Google and Amazon and can monitor where you're at and what you're doing and make up where you're at and what you're doing, to where no functional way to tell the difference between a real and a made up Google path for you is. Because if you're walking around with your cell phone, there's more and more studies showing they know where you are at every single moment of every single day. And one of the reasons they want to track you so closely is because if they show you an ad, and then within the next, I don't know, 24, 48 hours, you go to that business, they get paid more money. So it's not about you, John Smith, out there. It's just about, oh, well, our advertising gets, you know, people that see your ad are 30% more likely to go to your business. Buy tires, a muffler, ice cream, doesn't matter. And so that's why they want to track you, mostly. But once they can do that stuff, are you going to try to tell me that there won't be some people inside and outside the system that will be able to insert information? And you were at that murder scene. What were you doing at that murder scene that's 10 miles out from anywhere you want to be? We have the evidence right there. Kind of thing. And if this were to go dark, because I can see that with the modern surveillance states in places like Spain and Italy, they could probably round up all these African migrants and send them back home, because they can spot where they are, and they do generally physically look different than the regular Spaniard. And yes, that is a racial characteristic. Now, again, like I say, I've been in Britain. There's lots of Commonwealth black people living in Britain, and they're part of the society there. That's different than these floods of people coming in. And I live in America, in a truly multicultural city, and it is fine. There's problems, but it's fine. But our city and our culture and our society are built for it. But you can't, in my city, in my society, you can't constantly, uninterruptedly do a flow of peoples coming in forever at an unregulated rate. Meaning, if in this next year you have 5 million more people show up at my city, that's going to start overdoing the water system. They're already trying to limit how much water a household can use because of various problems in California and water. And this goes way back before the current governor. California is a pretty dry place, if you don't realize that. And Southern California is a very dry place. That's part of what makes it nice. We are sort of a coastal desert in that, so we have low humidity, but we're sort of cool because we're coastal. You go too far inland, it gets hot. It's desert. Trust me, I know. I spent a lot of time out there. So, you know, and so if we get 5 million new in this year and then 10 million next year, and at some point you break the system of Southern California. You just can't. I don't care if there's a civil war, a plague, whatever it may be happening in Mexico or Central America or in literal Timbuktu, which is out in Africa, there really is a place that way, that there is a humanitarian crisis beyond all imagining. My city can only take so many new people coming in, and at some point, because if nothing else, the water, but also the electricity budget being used, at some point we can't take any more people. Now, yes, to help you can move them to other cities, but I'm just stating that there is a practical maximum limit, and my city is fairly well, probably one of the best cities in the world, I'm talking about the greater, set up to deal with people that aren't of my culture, that didn't grow up in Southern California, having driver's license tests in more languages than you can probably readily come up with. So I'm not talking about, I'm talking about being invaded. I'm not talking about a few refugees. I'm not talking about, people are leaving bad conditions. They're being invaded. At some point, there's going to be a reaction. And if the reasonable politicians don't make reasonable laws now, they're only going to force extremists into power. Okay? And so is the future of the Western world right, left, or circle peoples going to be some hardline authoritarian regimes? Is that the way that the West survives? And I hope you know I'm not advocating for any of this. I'm just wondering aloud, if you keep going down this lunacy. Oh, and the statement had nothing to do with migration and people, so it has nothing to do with that. But I'm just trying to think. I'm sitting here looking at this map of the U.S., Europe. It's just not going to go away. I know there are racists out there who want to brown America, and they may say similar things in Europe. They literally say that they want to brown America. It's part of their coalition idea to get black people and Mexicans all to want to darken skin color, because they want to specifically change the racial makeup of America. That is a racist idea. That is an anti-white racist idea, as opposed to, like, my viewpoint is I want to have a generally Anglo-cultured America, whether that is black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, but I want them to be generally of an Anglo culture. Yes, I know the one state that has 2 official languages is New Mexico. It's both Spanish and English. That's the one state that has 2 official languages, and all government laws and everything has to be in those 2 languages. But that goes back to the founding of New Mexico as a state, as a province within the United States. There are really good cultural reasons for that to be so in New Mexico. You go to the state of Louisiana, they don't have any official language but English. But there is a long, ancient tradition of the French Cajuns down there. I don't know what the current population percentage of the Cajuns, whether they're a 5% minority or they're a 60% majority. I don't know. But I know the history that's connected to France and the colonial thing out there. So there are reasons for different ethnicities in different parts of America, and I am absolutely fine with that. But we do need a general cultural connectivity between them. We need that. But there are people that specifically want to change things, the color of the people, and that is a racist viewpoint. It happens to be anti-white, but if you were to just reverse that, and we want to lighten the skin color of America, if somebody were to say that, I'm not saying that. So if you were to say that, that would be taken as a racist thing, and it would be about equally bad, in my opinion. But people would go all over, go nuts about that in the media and online and Twitter and whatever else. And no, and I know there are some extremists watching me. No, this doesn't make it all right. If they do it, it doesn't make it all right for you to do it. I defend Western culture, not the Western race. Please understand there is a significant difference to that. A very significant difference to it. It is about people's cultural identity, not about their race. If you get somebody who is from the Congo, born and raised and lived most of their life in the Congo, they're Congolese. Now, they may move to America and become Congolese Americans, but they are still heavily influenced by their other culture. If you get people, say, from Afrikaners from Africa, South Africa, moving to the U.S., they become American Afrikaners. They have a different cultural viewpoint than Americans do. Not entirely alien because they are colonial people, though they come more from the Dutch background, and yeah, they've been sort of oppressed, if you will, by the English for a while. And so, yeah, you know, most Afrikaners, most of my understanding, speak reasonably good English. I think my understanding, some of the more isolated groups speak very little English, at least traditionally did. And yeah, I sort of knew people, not too many Afrikaners, but either Anglo-South Africans or Americans that served in that part of the world that would come upon heavily accented Afrikaners that, from some of their descriptions, didn't seem to be overly fluent in English. Not that you didn't understand the basics of what they were saying or they didn't understand you. It just they were more comfortable in Afrikaner than they were in English. So this isn't about that, but I'm just looking ahead at, because I get back to what I'm making, and this is going to be a rant video and a long one. Yes, I would like to be able to make YouTube a career that actually pays me realistic money. It doesn't pay me anywhere near realistic money at the moment. Yes, I do make a little money off this, but depending on where you go, it might buy me 2 or 3 pizzas a month. Literally, that's all I'm making off of this. So why am I doing this? Is to teach the lessons of history and looking at the turmoils and the chaos around World War II. And yes, it's pointing out bad behavior of the Germans, and currently we're looking at a lot of the bad behavior of the Japanese. Also, we've talked about this, a lot of the bad behavior of the Soviets, the Russians, whatever you want to, whether you want to define them culturally, it would be the Russians, the Soviets politically. It's sort of like the Nazis versus the Germans, whatever. And so I'm trying in my small way to use a medium and format of gaming to talk about issues of the past, lessons to be learned, often giving my conclusions about them, but you can take your own lessons away from them. And so, you may come to different conclusions than I do, and that's fine. And if you are, there are other, rational solutions that are well based in knowledge of the past lessons of history than mine. Okay, progressivism. You can go down the progressive path. It does work, but if you take it to a too much of a socialistic path, notice I said too much, and of course radical too much is Stalin, Lenin, Mao, Pol Pot, Sundero Luminoso. I don't know who the leader of that movement was, but you can go those. It goes to that far. It will eventually collapse on itself. But if we were looking at, for sure, if we were talking about the country of Liechtenstein, I go, okay, let's have a hospital. Let's have the government pay for it. Because the government's us, we're small, we'll have a single hospital. Liechtenstein is a small place. I would support not just a single payer system, I would support a government-owned and operated hospital. And the government appoints the director of the hospital. We know who he is. It's a small enough community. We can probably know if he is a really corrupt person or a really incompetent person. We could throw him out. It would probably work great. And I would be all for that. Okay? Probably I would agree to expanding that to Luxembourg. Bit bigger state. Don't know how many hospitals they, not just care facilities, but hospital, big sort of hospital things they have in Luxembourg. But yeah, I'd probably be for that. Getting it to Denmark. I might just be for that, but I might be more for a mixed system in Denmark, in which we have some government-owned and operated hospitals, some basic single-payer, other facility type things, that if somebody wishes to, the government sets, well, we'll pay you X for, per doctor's visit, or per, if you're taking care of older, nursing homes, we'll pay you X. If you can maintain good standards and make a profit off of it, fine. Efficiency, fine, great, single payer. And then allow private doctors to work as well. Private doctors may be doing cosmetic surgery. Sometimes cosmetic surgery are things that, in a small system like that, I would agree that the government should pay for, that people are disfigured by burns or something like that. But I mean, just, make the woman look 10 years younger kind of cosmetic surgery. That should all be privatized, and allow private doctors to exist. So, but still a mostly government-supported basic healthcare system. I could be talked into that for Denmark. I could be talked into that for the state of Connecticut. So long as the state of Connecticut required, 10 years of living in the state of Connecticut beforehand, and only dealt with emergency medical services for non-Connecticut residents. So if you live in another state outside of Connecticut and you get cancer and you move to Connecticut to be on the Connecticut free healthcare system, they go, will your state pay for this that you just moved from, or we're sending you back to your state because you just moved here? Now, if you've lived here, not that you had to be born here, but if you've lived here for a long time and contributed to our society of Connecticut, and now that you're sick, yeah, we'll take care of you. I could be talked into it for Connecticut. Connecticut's a fairly small population, fairly manageable. I cannot be talked into it for California because we have radically different cultural systems. And here we do have, and I don't know all of them, but there have been some identified things that do seem to be genetically based diseases. We have such a mixed group of race of people, mixed dietary groups of people, all kinds of stuff. We can't have a government-run system effectively. You can have insurance, you can have certain amounts of regulation, but you can't talk me into a California-based government-run healthcare system. That is just too big of a group of population. It's too big. If you want to pick out a particular city in California and do one, okay. Not the city of LA, again, that's too big. But if you were some remote, the city of Independence or the town of Independence in California, I sort of happen to know it a little bit. Been many years since I've been there now. But if they go, and it's so small you couldn't have like what you might be thinking of a big hospital, but we need an emergency care facility, that has a doctor and be able to do surgeries because we're X number of hours away, and there just isn't a private incentive, for a company to build and maintain doctors and some nurses. It's just not economically viable to do that. And go, okay, yeah, you could talk me into a county or a city-run hospital for that. You can even for a major city like LA, you can talk me into a city-run a city-run hospital. Now, there may be 40 or other hospitals within the greater LA area, but you want to do one that's a charity hospital that's, well, not a charity, because it's not charity, because you steal, you forcibly take the money from the people and you put it into us, but a free hospital. Charity hospitals work off of voluntary giving to the hospital fund that helps people out, but this is a free hospital. Okay, you could talk me into a free hospital in the city of LA that is a big hospital that can take care of a lot of people. You can talk me into that. A free one. Not all of them, because this way some people get that who need it, who get free health care. Some people. Can't take care of everybody, doesn't cover everything. And of course, I know I'm talking to a bunch of people around the world. If you show up at an emergency medical hospital, all hospitals basically, we can get into weird exemptions, but basically all hospitals have a emergency entrance for emergency doctors. All emergency cares at all hospitals in America, if you show up, they will take care of you, whoever you are. If you have money, they will want to be paid. But if you have no money, you have no ability to pay, it will be free. What they do is they pad the bills of all the other patients at that hospital, which are basically being paid via insurance, to cover the people they give for free. Now, you may say, oh, but I've heard this story that they're taking away this old woman's home because she had a home that was worth $1 million or $500,000, and she was on, Medicare, Medicaid, or whatever, but she over the government's allotment, because if you're old enough, you're on Medicare. You get Medicare. It's the older people in America, it's not free health care, it's Medicare health care. But if you want above and beyond that, want more of that, there are insurance programs that are designed to pay what Medicare doesn't pay. And there are other things like that. But if you go and spend over it, they may come after the old woman's home with the idea of getting paid back, and then, after the selling it, giving her what's left so she can rent an apartment somewhere. So if you have the assets, also, because I know a little bit about this because sort of my mother's going through some of this situation. You can put a lot of your money or your house and other things into certain trust funds so that they can't come and get it. So that then she can be, theoretically, and I don't know, all this stuff, so that you can put the house and other things into a trust fund so that then to the government she sort of looks poor, but the house is in trust, so they can't attack it. You can put your assets in protected if you pay attention to some of that stuff. But basically, if you need free emergency medical health care in America, you get it. Long-term, elective surgery, other things, that's a different matter. No system's perfect. And so, yes, you may think, so what is the West going to do? And I'm raging in my head right now, trying to say to responsible elected officials, and this could include, and I know probably most of you have left by now, because I'm not ranting and raving, and I'm not talking history, and this will be labeled as a special episode, obviously. Not just talking about Democrats or leftists, but why the hell the Republicans haven't paid for and built that goddamn wall. And it's because the Koch brothers and other types that want the cheap and free labor, not free labor, the cheap labor coming in, and that push on them not to do so. And some of the Republicans would like to do so, but they're afraid of voting for it because they're worried about their re-election and all this other stuff. And so this is also to them that, don't you effing realize? I'm trying not to get demonetized. I'm trying to, and I can just that's just a slight sample of what I'm raging in my head at the moment right now. That you had serious problems in Germany, and because, shall we say, the responsible left, and we could, even the SPD or whatever at the time, and the DP, the Deutsches Party, the Hindenburg's party, and these, von Pappen's people, the responsible right. Don't you people realize that if you had just addressed the serious problems that were going on in society, you wouldn't have had Hitler, you wouldn't have had mass destruction of your society? And don't you freaking people today realize that the radical left and the radical right in Germany wanted to destroy the system, so they did everything to exacerbate the problem? And I've been thinking this for the last few days. This last weekend was the 1-year anniversary of the Unite the Right demonstration in America. What city it was? In Virginia. We'll put it in Virginia. I know it was in the state of Virginia. And where they had the Tiki Torch March. And they were shouting blood and soil, which is the most basic Nazi belief system you can have, is blood and soil. So they were shouting the Nazi propaganda and marching with that. And that one woman gets killed, and we can talk about how some of the stuff surrounding that an Antifa protester pointed his AR-15 at that driver very, very shortly, literally in the driving distance that he does to run into him, at that person, and that person who pointed the gun at him was saying that the guy was slow rolling past us, so he pointed his rifle at him, and then that guy then zooms off and hits and kills the woman. So did that guy really want to kill leftists, or was he just scared out of his mind because somebody pointed an AR-15 at him? I don't know. And this year they did Unite the Right too, and I loved that event, because out of all of America, they could only find 24 Nazis to show up. I liked the first Unite the Right because they can only find like 300 Nazis to show up. Okay? Out of all America, I know there's more Nazis out there, but there's only 300 of them that could get off work to show up at the big national rally. So we had 300 Nazis. Now we're down to 24 that could show up. All they could find was 24 Nazis to show up. Okay? That's a wonderful thing, that there's only that many, because we don't want any Nazis. So that just tells you how unimportant the Nazis are in America. Yeah, I know there's more, but they're just such a minuscule amount. And I know I'm talking to more people outside of, normally in this channel, maybe not now, probably not talking hardly anybody. I'd love to hear somebody say, I made it to the end of this, but you may watch the BBC or whatever your thing is and see the zoomed in close-up full shot that shows the reporter in front of the group, and it's wide. But if you were to zoom out a little bit more, you would realize that there were only 24 Nazis. They all got on one bus, and there was plenty of room afterwards. That's how few. Now, there was many, many more Antifa people out there, and since they weren't allowed to punch a Nazi, they punched a bunch of reporters, or a few reporters, or a reporter or something. Don't want to overstate it, but yeah. So it's really the radical left in America. And then there's the Trump supporter, which the media wants to make out as radical right and racist. They're not. The least racist group in the world are westernized white people. Okay, they're the people that at least are concerned about the race of others than any other group. I'm not talking about hatred of other races, but just categorizing people by race. Westernized white people are the least racist as a group of people in the world. Yes, they are a very powerful group of people, and they are relatively a small minority of people compared to all the Chinese, Indians, Africans, Latin Americans, Indonesians, whatnot, Iranians. We are a minority of people, and we have, yes, the North American continent, the Australian continent, and European continent, and other really key targeted places around the world. We've done really well for ourselves. True. I'm not going to dispute any of that. But that doesn't mean we're bad people, that we've done so well for ourselves. And no, this isn't nothing about white. This is about westernized culture and society. But don't you freaking get the lesson I'm talking about. If you don't address these problems, you will radicalize the population, whether that's in Europe, in America, in Australia, wherever it is. If you don't address these problems. I remember recently seeing, and I know I'm wandering now, I'm babbling, but Lauren Southern seems like a reasonably nice woman. Goes down to Australia. She said she's mostly done, I don't know what you call it, street theater or something like that. If you were to, take that somebody says something bad about Christians. Well, if you were to say that about Muslims, is that, so she sort of like, overly, stated things, but mostly sort of as in a street theater and the guy from Taxi, I'm blanking on his name, that did these, Kaufman or whatever, but street theater type stuff. And so she wanted to walk by a mosque in Australia somewhere, Sydney, Melbourne, some major city. And she is stopped by the chief of police, basically ordered not to go. Oh, well, I'd be arrested. What do you want to do? I want to walk by it. Is that all? Well, I might ask some questions. Was that? And they blocked her. So there's a no-go zone here. That they blocked this nice 20-something woman who, had a camera crew of some sort. I didn't see it, but obviously this whole thing was being recorded. And from walking and maybe interviewing some people, because she might cause a public disturbance simply by walking and maybe asking a question. Because her question, whatever it might be, and they were worried, and I don't know, and she might say something, and I'm not even going to say it, but something outrageous about some, Muslim person, including the prophet or something. She might say that, or she might just say something like, something benign. I don't know. Like, do you support terrorism or not? That would be benign, in my opinion. Because everyone should be coming back. No, I don't. If you're living in Australia. But, so who knows what she might have said. But instead of just somebody getting disgusted and walking away because of what she says, they were worried that it might cause a violent reaction. Whose fault is it? The person who says something, or the person who's going to be violent against a woman on a public street? Whose fault is it? Whose fault is it? Is it the person that carries the sign that says all Republicans suck? Or is it the fault of the Republican who goes up and punches them in the face? If all that somebody is doing is walking down the public street carrying a sign that says that, I don't support anybody punching anybody in the face. And so the people in Australia, the government in Australia, cannot maintain civil order. And it knows it can't maintain civil order in certain regions. How does this society work? How can you have a Western civilization and not be civil? Notice civilization. And that may be an Eastern civilization if you say something bad in public about the prophet or something, you get punched in the face. You know, tell me those basic rules, so if I ever go to Saudi Arabia, I won't do that. And we'll be fine, because I'll know the rules. You don't do that in Saudi Arabia or list other countries, because I'm not even allowed to go into the city of Mecca because I'm not a Muslim. So, yeah, tell me the rules, and if I choose to go there, yeah, I'll abide by the rules while I'm there, But we have rules in Western civilization. You get to walk down the sidewalk unmolested. And if it's, a baddish neighborhood, well, okay, you can have a cop or two there just to make sure. And you deal with it. And if the people can't deal with it, you start locking them up. Because they've broken the laws. Not just because they're random people on the street. You lock them up when they break the laws, and you throw the maximum penalties at them, and you keep them locked up for it. If you punch somebody in the face, it's assault, and I don't know how many days you get for assault in Australia, but maybe since it's Australia, punching in the face is a friendly thing to do to a bloke on a Saturday night, and maybe it's not a problem. But maybe if you punch a woman in the face, it means 6 months in jail. And every single person who breaks the law, you put them in jail. And when they do it the second time, it's a longer sentence. And the third time and the fourth time, and eventually it's life in jail. Because they've committed a crime. Not because of what they believe, it's because they commit a crime. That's how civilization works. How are we going to deal with this if we can't even, or if we don't even call out unreal statements? I'm going back to this politician. Making a statement as basically as, oh, the sun doesn't exist. It's just a big corporate propaganda to sell sunscreen. There's no such thing as the sun. Don't look up in the sky. That ball of fire isn't up there. It doesn't exist. It's just a figment of your imagination. And that's almost how unreal the person's statement was. And he was serious, and he wanted governmental action based upon his unreal statement. So how do we survive? How do we function? Is it to move to, and again, I don't mean it's going to be radical right. It might be. And I know that there's 100, 200 people that seem to have watched a lot of my videos, and they sort of understand. You guys get some of my message about World War II. Because I'm sitting here looking at this map. You get my lessons about how up until the Munich Agreement, Chamberlain just didn't do anything really proper about setting Britain's defenses, and it took the shakeup of that for them to really start doing proper things about defenses. Still didn't do enough, obviously. And they didn't do all the, well, there's both enough, and then there's what they could have. They could have done much more in getting Britain ready for the likely coming war, but Chamberlain even doesn't do that. And you still have Churchill out there, talking about the Nazis, and they need to be dealt with. So you've gotten my lessons on Britain, and if you want peace, prepare for war. You get a lot of that. You guys also get that reasonable laws need to be enforced. Like I say, we can't. They estimated that, and this time I will sort of go, that you could move all of human population to the square area of the big island of Hawaii, and we could all stand there with reasonable elbow room. Not maybe all there be able to lay down all at once, but all stand. Again, this is very mountainous, so I'm just taking the basic square area, so that we can all stand here all at once. Now, after a few hours, where are we going to get food? Because how are you going to pass? Some ship's going to show up and land food and try to pass it. How far is it going to get passed from person to person? Where we're all going to go to the toilet? And what's where we're going to get water? Obviously, we can't without building some sort of super skyscraper city that's volume and height. Which you could do that. because we can look at places like New York or Tokyo and see how we can densely populate in people, but we could just all sort of stand, the human population of the world, stand together in Hawaii. But we all can't physically function just standing in Hawaii as it is now. So if the last place left on Earth on Hawaii, we all can't move there. Okay? So Europe is only going to be able to absorb physically so many people. Now, maybe that's 10 times, 20 times more than the people that live there. But at some point, the people that live there are going to say no more people coming in because, hey, we're Dutch. You're not. This is ours. It's not yours. And whether it's individual properties, an apartment, a house, a farm, a business, or collective properties, a city, a town, a county, a country. This is ours, and it's not yours. And so at some point they're going to say no more. It is fine, and I'm not, as you know, not anti a trickle of people coming in, but it should be determined how many people by the country itself. And I know, you're not allowed to become Chinese. There is no possibility for a non-Chinese person to become Chinese. There are no forms, there are no permissions. It is not doable. If you marry a Chinese person, you can legally marry a Chinese person in China. You know what they do? They throw you out of the country. That's an overstatement, but it's sort of the case. I follow two YouTubers who live in China and have married Chinese women. These are guys who married Chinese women. Yeah, they live in China. Both of them had residency status in China based on their jobs. Well, once they were married, they had to quit their jobs and no longer have Chinese residency status. They get to come and visit their wives. Now, they may end up spending more time in China than outside of China, but they can no longer work in China. They no longer have residency in China. They can come and visit their wives. Now, they may visit their wives for 6 months, leave for 3 days, and come back and visit their wife for 6 months and leave for 3 days. But they have no residency in China anymore. And they both have YouTube channels. AVD China is sort of their combined channel. And they talk about this and this stuff. This is different than Hong Kong. This is different than Macau. This is mainland China. And so, these are two, one's an American and one's a South African, and they both guys that live in China. And functionally, they don't have any homes anywhere else. And they're there, and the way they make money is now their YouTube channel. And they're big enough things. They, before, I don't know, had jobs teaching English or whatever. They've lost whatever job that they may have had working in China. And so the Chinese government knows they're there because they have to report to the police department weekly or monthly or whatever it is and get their things, their resident or their not residency because they don't have residency, but get their permission to stay stamped and all this stuff, that they're there purely on the sufferance of the Chinese government because they married a Chinese woman. Basically, China wants them, you marry a Chinese person, doesn't matter male or female, you and your spouse get to go away to, the other country. There is no ability for a foreigner to become a Chinese person. It just doesn't exist. There are no forms. There is no path. So there is no immigration to China that is done functionally based permanently. Now, yes, we can look at, there were a lot of mostly North Koreans that fled into China during the Korean War, and there's been a trickle of sort of illegal Koreans going into China and sort of staying, and we can find similar cases in other places around China, so you can find fault with this, but you have no significant refugee population or other migrant populations coming into China. You don't have it. You have Japan is almost the same way. So this isn't, and to the large extent, this is not based on race. in that I don't know if you're physically born in China to non-Chinese parents if you're Chinese. I don't know about that. I just quite honestly don't know if none of your parents are Chinese citizens. But it is sort of functionally based on national citizenship, which may correlate to a racial group, but may not be really racist in that sense, but they just don't allow it. So you can only take so many people coming in until your system, your culture, is going to react to it. And I've been talking about the ugliness of cultures reacting to, and there wasn't huge populations moving into Germany. It was other chaos going on in society that caused Nazism, that caused fascism, that caused, it was the rapid industrialization of Japan that's causing a lot of Japan's problems. Without governments dealing with it. Well, they were dealing with it, but not dealing with it effectively. And they're not alone. There's also you have the communist revolution in Russia. And that was even more of a madhouse show and whatnot. And so, have they not learned? Have you people not learned? Like I was saying, you, the 200 or 300 viewers, sort of know these lessons, either before I've talked about them or now understand them, but has not society learned? I guess not. This is Gamer losing his mind. If anybody's still here, thank you for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Maybe I'll get to playing someday again. Probably just in a few hours or something, but I just couldn't believe the statement I heard on television. And again, I should just sign off, but it wasn't that somebody out on the street made that statement. It was an elected official. See you next time. Next time for Hearts of Iron.